right, this thing's on. I don't know, it's 2 o'clock. I don't know about you, but this is about the time that I like to grab a coffee. So if any of you decide to lay your heads down instead and just fall asleep, that is okay by me. I will not take it personally. All right, we're going to be talking about developing and managing an OWASP project. This is a very high level Projects 101 style of conversation. What we'll be going over here is the introduction and how to start an OWASP project, an introduction to the OWASP website pages, because we do things a little bit differently. We use GitHub pages when we're doing our website. We will go over a little bit about sponsorship, funding, a very little bit about vendor neutrality. That's a big topic in today's project world. The project committee is currently focused on that, I guess you could say. We will also go over what the project levels are, how to graduate a project, and assuming that you've been around for a while or you're tired of the project, how to go about end-of-lifing the project. So, why start an OWASP project? It's an excellent question. Most people start by, they have a love of open source and they believe that there is some domain, if you will, that needs more tools or more resources, and they believe that application security can change the world. Or they just have knowledge. A lot of our projects are documentation projects where OWASP Top 10, perfect example, where the people just want to share what they know about application security with the rest of the world. Another thing that's not on here, interestingly enough, is like who can start an OWASP project? Basically, it's anyone. It doesn't matter whether you're in application security or not, as long as you have an interest in it. You don't need to provide your resume on the form to start an OWASP project. It's just simply whoever wants to start an OWASP project can do so, provided they give a few details, which we'll go over in just a bit. And then if you're not ready to start an OWASP project, you might consider contributing to OWASP projects. They have the same reasons for contributing as for starting an OWASP project. And another reason would be maybe you're not quite ready to lead an OWASP project. And hopefully you will be after this. All right, whenever starting an OWASP project, the first thing you have to do is gather the necessary information. This is true for everything that you do. It's not a big surprise. What you're going to need is a good name for your project, the type of project. We will go over all of these things. Classification, an open source license. If you are not the only person who will be leading the project, you need the names and email addresses as well as your GitHub usernames. It is important to have at least a short description of what your project plans to do, what you expect to deliver with the project, and a good roadmap. So what is a good name? First of all, it's not an acronym. I know you see ZAP up here, and that is an acronym. That's one of our top flagship projects. ZAP stands for Z Attack Proxy. The reason why acronyms are not a good name is that they're just not descriptive enough. ZAP has been around for a long time. Everybody knows OWASP ZAP. But you don't know, you down with OTT? That would be the OWASP Top 10, right? That's not what the OWASP Top 10 is. It's the OWASP Top 10. So you don't want to come in with an acronym. Maybe you can come in with Security Knowledge Framework, right? That is also one of our flagship projects. It is now SKF to everybody who knows the project. It's better to come in with a good name, descriptive, people understand it just from that name, and not an acronym. If you're going to start a project, please do not start it with top 10. Okay? I mean, you're thinking maybe that's a good idea, but really we get you know, 50 or more, I would say, top 10 style projects within a particular year, where people just, I want to say that I'm part of a top 10 project just as the association is, and it's not a good choice. Here we have the OWASP top 10 of the top 10 mobile cloud desktop on the edge, right? Not a good project name. But you want to be clear and descriptive, definitely not offensive. A lot of people like to play with leet speak and throw in a whole bunch of letters instead of, or a whole bunch of numbers instead of letters. Believe me, I can read those too now. And it does not need to include OWASP whenever you're applying for for this project name. I will put OWASP in front of it. It's not required to put it on the form. All right, briefly let's go over the project types. Currently there are 3 types of projects at OWASP. If you can come up with any other types, if you have a good argument for that, feel free to put that in there in the text description area. But we have the documentation project. That's basically, and any of these projects could contain pieces of other ones. This is just the top level designation for the project. So documentation is like the top 10. SAM, there's our acronym, but they have an actual name, right? Security knowledge framework, all of these are documentation projects. Code projects are things, let's say mod security core rule sets, Samurai, WTF, and tools are ZAP, Defect Dojo, dependency track. Documentation is documentation code and tool. There's a little bit of, you can look at those as a kind of mixture between the two. Code is basically either pieces that can be used in other things, right? Or it's a particular application in and of itself. Tools are meant to be used like with other tools as part of, say, like a pipeline or something like that. And that's the reason why you can see Defect Dojo, ZAP, those guys are down there. And then there's the classification. I don't know how many people actually think that these are applicable, right? It's getting really difficult to determine where these fit within a particular project. So I'm not a stickler on you choosing one and it has to stick in this particular classification. But as you can see, the builder are for tools and applications, not specifically offensive or defensive. A breaker is basically an offensive techniques and functionality kind of application. Defender concerned mainly with defensive techniques. And you'll find things like, say, OWASP ZAP, well, they're going to be all 3, right? So it's absolutely not this thing where you're one or the other, or you can only be, you know, it's always a combination of them. So feel free to pick multiples. And you will need an open source license. The open source licenses are all listed at this website that you see right here. Opensource.org. The only one that I don't think is on there is the one that we use for most of our documentation projects, and that's that Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 4.0. That is the vast majority of our documentation projects, and in fact, it's the one for the OWASP website in general. And submitting a new project request. This, you go to this contact.owasp.org, which I will show in just a minute. And basically what you do is you go to the topic that you're wanting to contact us about. It's general, that is correct. I cannot read this properly. Here we go. And there under contact us, you need to choose one of these options. It's the new project request. And when you're here, you will fill out these pieces. And notice that these pieces are all what I just told you you need to gather beforehand. So you will basically just go out, fill down this list. You'll indicate whether or not you require a GitHub repository. I didn't mention that, but every project that we have will have at least one GitHub repository, that being their web page repository for that project. So how do you plan for project success? First and most important, and believe me, we have a large number of projects that don't complete this first step, and that's to update your project web page. If you don't put your information on your project web page, people won't know about your project. After you update your project web page, you'll need to add your leaders. You'll need to find contributors to help you with the project. You'll gather sponsors, apply for grants, and eventually, provided that you get past the initial, what we'll call alpha stage, you'll want to get your project promoted. Let's go over these things. All right. The OWASP website itself is based on Jekyll and GitHub pages. We moved to the website January 2019, I believe it was, from the old wiki. And I don't know, most of you people probably have seen the old wiki. Yes, thank you. That was my reaction too when I first looked at it. So now we're on at least what looks like a more modern website, I hope. There is some JavaScript in it for some of the dynamic content because Jekyll is static. And Azure functions that we use for some of our internal things. If you go and use the membership page to sign up for a membership, you're using Azure functions through the through JavaScript. Let's go to that OWASP project chapter example right quick. And you will end up, once you've applied and got accepted, you'll end up with a page that is a project page. And the project page will look something similar to this. It will have that text that says this is an example. It will have that main tab, the example tab. It will not have most of the stuff below that because that's just a bunch of examples that I put in for eventual project leaders to go look at this page and say, hey, how do I do a particular thing? And it will be in this page to help out. This migration page, a secondary page, by the way, if you're taking pictures, don't worry about taking pictures of the particular URLs, as I will have a whole long list of QR codes that you can take pictures of at the end of this. But the migration page has got a whole lot more examples. We will go look at that in just a second as well. But first, back to the project page. So the project page, once you get it, you will get an email basically telling you that this page has been generated and that you can go to the very bottom of the page and click on this nice little link saying edit on GitHub. And that will present you with that index.md page on GitHub. Let's look at this. So we go back to the top level folder in the repo, and you can see that there are things here, and most of this stuff will exist for your project. The important things for you are the index.md page, the info.md page, the leaders.md page, and the tab example a little bit. I'd prefer you didn't use tabs personally. That's there as an example to show you how. A lot of our project leaders from the old wiki, where we had tabs and galore, they pined for the days of the tabs. And I went ahead and implemented a tab capability on the project pages just so that it's there. I would prefer personally if you did links and multiple pages because you can put as many sub pages as you want to underneath your project. You will not have the data or the includes folder or the posts folder necessarily, but those are there as examples as well to show you how to do these things because you can change a lot of the how your page looks just by changing includes, for instance. And I want to briefly go over this page just to show you before we go into any more of those particular markdown files, but this is just a screenshot of the previous page, and as you can see, the index.md file is that piece that's over on the left-hand side. The tabs are up top. The main is just part of, it's there because it's part of the main page. You don't have any control over that, but the example tab is part of the tab example.md, and that has to be named a particular way. All your tabs have to be tab underscore, and then whatever the name of the title is for that tab. This top part on the top right and at the bottom where it says the OWASP Foundation blah blah and the upcoming OWASP global events, that's part of the theme, just like the top bar at the very top is part of the theme, and so that's just part of what's going to be on your web page. The info.md file controls what you see inside the sidebar, the example project information, what kind of project it is, what classification, your downloads, social links, whatever you want to put over there. The leaders.md file is where you will actually have the leaders listed. It has a particular format as well. So the first thing you're going to want to do when you first get to your page is go to your index.md page. And you are going to want to edit it because there will be a bit of text which already exists in this one. This is an example page, right? And you're going to want to take out most of that. Anything that's in there previously, you're going to want to take that out of your project page because I won't know that you actually have a valid working project website until that default text is out of there. That's how I can tell whether or not it's been updated. And once you do that, then you have the level, which has already been set for you to incubator. That's what most projects come in as. We'll let you know if you've, for whatever reason, perhaps you're bringing a project over from another place and you're actually have a mature project. We might change that level to lab, for instance. That is all listed within that index.md page at the top. This top information right here, it is called the front matter in Jekyll. This was meant to be partly a training, and we would have gone over more in depth about how to do Jekyll, but for purposes of this, I'm just going to show you that this top part between the 3 lines and the bottom 3 lines there would say layout, title, tags, etc. That's called front matter, and you will already have most of this filled out for you, so you won't have to do that. The parts that are important might be the tags, if you wanted to get particular tags about your project, but just short example names or whatever, descriptive things. The level will be set, like I said, to. There's really not much you want to do with that, and you definitely don't want to delete it because that will just cause major issues. Your site will not build. And next we can look at real quick the info.md file. That's pretty straightforward, right? That was the sidebar at the top right. And perhaps the more important one would be the leaders.md file. And this has a particular format, and it's a required format. If you mess with this format, then I won't know that you're a project leader. So it's basically you have the leaders and you list your name and the contact address for, however you want to be contacted for your project. And interestingly enough, I'll go ahead and talk about that now since we're in the leaders.md file. This is also how you would add leaders to your project. It's good to let us know. That's nice. It's not required that you tell us, but it's better to let us know. But you can put their names in there and it will be picked up and we will know that there's now another leader on the project. All right, project sponsorship and funding. This is probably more interesting. Projects are encouraged to seek sponsorship. How do you do it? You're asking me. It's hard. It's hard. Every bit of, if you've ever tried to get a sponsor for whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's an event like this event, doing sponsorship is difficult. I will tell you that the funds must go through OWASP. It is just one of our requirements that anybody who sponsors a project, the funds go to OWASP, and then OWASP will provide the funds back to the projects. But once you have the funds, you can request pre-approval to spend the money or reimbursement for expenses that you've already done. and this is important, you should probably always seek pre-approval before you do a reimbursement, just in case it's not one of the things that we actually cover. In most cases, we try to cover reasonable expenses. We also just recently developed a program to make it so that projects can request grants. What can you do with a grant? Let's say that you get a company XYZ to sponsor your particular project, and they would like to see you put in a particular feature in your project. They might give a grant. One of our projects just recently picked up a $100,000 grant. The grant can then be turned around and requested from the foundation, which will give the funds to the project to say fund 2 people to work on a particular thing for 3 months, right? So that's what grants are for. And projects are going to be one of the largest consumers of these grants, because you've got actual work deliverables that you need to provide. That particular link, I'm not going to go there for this one. It's also on the QR code later, but that will take you to the funding portal in order to be able to request a grant for your project. How to find sponsors? Okay, all the projects, just like I said, have a hard time with this. The first place I would tell you to look is your employer. A lot of times employers will fund particular projects, especially when it also gets their name on a sponsorship tab within the project. Being associated with OWASP does have certain benefits to that company. So I would always say reach out to your employer. Next person you could reach out to is our Director of Events and Corporate Support. She is phenomenal with being able to bring in sponsors for our events, for trainings, for all sorts of things. And if there's one person that has just a depth of knowledge on that, it will be her. You also want to search corporations who target similar fields. So maybe your company's not interested, or maybe they are, and they did sponsor you, but that doesn't mean you just stick with the one. Go find 3 or 4 sponsors, and the more sponsors you have, the more chance you have of getting those grants to be able to actually work on your project, specifically. So as I was saying, you could put your sponsors on a supporters tab or a sponsors tab. I bring this up because this is a good example of separating out your supporters from, say, your main page. There are projects that end up putting, say, a corporation within their main page, and that is generally frowned upon. Vendor neutrality, again, what I spoke about from the project committee, they have a particular dislike when projects do that. All right. Speaking of vendor neutrality, all projects are encouraged to practice vendor neutrality. The big question is, what does that mean? So the first step, leaders should not all be from one corporation. We certainly have projects that is true about, but it's better that if you have, say, 3 people in your corporation who want to work on the project, great, go find a 4th who's not from your corporation. The sponsors, as I said here, need to be relegated to a sponsors tab or a supporters tab. And no sponsor should be, and this doesn't mean like on the same line, this means no sponsor should be like always talked about, like, you're using the sponsor name all the time and not all the other sponsors. The project itself, and this is one of the more important ones, should not be used to upsell to a full version of a project. We have a couple of projects right now that the project committee is looking at to try to determine whether this is, are they upselling, or is it just that they're providing a service and it happens to be similarly named. It's not a requirement that that your project be named different than, say, a version that you're actually commercialized, right? There's no reason that they can't have the same name according to our policies. But they absolutely shouldn't be constantly upselling, hey, if you really want this feature, go buy our real thing. And the corporation name should not be part of the project name. That should go without saying, but definitely don't do that. What vendor neutrality is not, it does not mean you can't make money. You can absolutely make money with your open source OWASP project as long as it's not, directly involved in that money making. There are projects, I won't provide any specific examples, but there are projects that have support, paid support for using the project. That is perfectly fine. It's just so long as the project itself isn't being used to promote that actual support. So project levels, they are divided into 3 categories currently. Count them, 1, 2, okay, 4. Technically it's 3, all right? There's the incubator, which is your basic alpha version. Just now starting out, bugs all over the place, incubator project. There's the lab project, which means it's working. You've fleshed out what it does. It could be rough around the edges, probably doesn't have translation. Then there is flagship, which is the actual third thing, which is basically production level, strategically important to the foundation. It's preferable that it's internationalized. I bring up the mature and put it in there because there is no third thing. That's currently. There's no third thing currently, but we are talking about adding a mature level. And that mature level would be more like production-ready code, just like flagship. But whereas flagship is strategically important to the foundation, it would be something that we would have the board vote on and say, this is strategically important, and the board thinks so, and now it's a flagship. The mature would be production level, what currently flagship is, basically. And most projects start as incubator and progress through those stages. But as I said, sometimes they might come in as a lab or even possibly flagship because we deem it strategically important enough. Okay, advancing through the stages, you can request as a project leader, once you believe that your project has reached a certain level, to go from incubator to lab. And you would go to this form, which is also on a QR code. And the project committee, which includes me, will review the project for the items that are in this form. And we determine whether or not it should be promoted. We're currently revising how we do lab to flagship, because with adding the lab to mature would be the same type process. And then mature to flagship would end up, again, going to the board for a vote. All right, once you become a project, there will be a certain number of services that you will be able to use. Among those, GitHub, Docker Hub, if we can get it to work again. AWS, Azure, GCP, those, some of these are based on project level, right? We might not provide Azure capability to an incubator project. It really depends. You have Meetup. If you choose to use Meetup, we can absolutely allow you to use the Pro Meetup and get people to join your project that way. Zoom, we have Jira, we have graphic design services through our contractor that we use for those purposes. Documentation services, absolutely. Community translation services. I mentioned that because if you need your project translated, the best place to go is into the community Slack and request people, because as we know, this is a global organization. And so we have people in all the countries around the world who will be able to help you with your translation. And project handbook is listed at the end, and I put it in there kind of as a joke. Only because the project handbook needs to be revised, and it's currently in the project committee for that. The current version is 2014, and it is terribly outdated. Project end of life. At some point, you'll get tired of doing the project, or something happens to where you're no longer able to do the project, and you're going to want to let it go away. In a way, you're tired of it, or you just haven't been working on it. And what's going to happen is we review these projects on a recurring basis. You see the activity tracker coming soon. We will certainly have a place where you'll be able to see the projects that are most active and which ones are not active. And we can see it too, so that we can figure out how to go about this process. The two main ways to end your involvement in a project: one is passing the torch. That is the preferred way, of course. And that's the reason why we prefer you to have at least 2 leaders on a project. Because if you have the 2 leaders, then maybe the second leader can pick it up instead. Much better to have multiple leaders. That way we can pass the torch. But if you don't, please don't just abandon the project. You bring it up to me, bring it up to the project committee, tell us that you'd really like to have this project continue. Could you find somebody to help? And we will look for somebody to try to take over the project. We'd much prefer the project continue under a different leader. The last option is the archiving the project. If we just can't find anybody, or the project has been abandoned for many years, you'll notice that there are a lot of projects like that currently at OWASP. And that's because this first part is a little bit broken right now. We're working with the project committee to get that fixed. But we'll archive the project if we have to. All right, what project resources are available to you as a project leader to help you out? Myself, that is my email address. You can certainly reach out to me. I'm happy to help. The project committee, they are a group of some of our top leaders that have been around for a very long time. They can help you, believe me. Very important resource. And certainly you are welcome to come to any of the project meetings. It's on our public event calendar. We have those monthly. Other leaders, another excellent place, not just the committee. And you can find their contact information on their project page. It's required that they have contact information. The leaders list, we have a group, leaders@owasp.org. That is a Google group that you are free to join. And that's a good place to go find leaders as well as their contact information. Or better, and this is the best place to go, is the community Slack. I put the invite link up there for you. Top channels for that is your OWASP community channel, your projects channel, and your project committee channel. And they are happy to help in all instances. And here we'll go through the QR codes that I've mentioned earlier. If you need to find these particular links and you want to take pictures, I'll leave these up for a few seconds for each one of these. There are a lot of them. Starting a project, that's the form. The example project page was the project chapter example page. It's also used for chapters, obviously. The theme repository, I didn't go over that much because this is it's more of a training thing. Basically, the theme repository will help you out if you need to figure out there are different layouts for your project pages. We certainly have more than just the layout that you saw for the one project page, but that's more of an advanced kind of Jekyll type thing. So the migration page, which has a bunch of helpful links and important information about tabs and how to make those work, that is all on the migration page. The funding page, which will be very important to you as a project leader. Project graduation, also a form, it's a Google form that the project committee came up with. Project committee page, there are other resources for projects listed on the project committee page, including an upcoming vendor neutrality best practices. There's the leaders Google group, direct to that. So the question is, what's the best way for a student chapter to contribute to OWASP projects? There's multiple ways. One would be, in my first suggestion, provided that you're not wanting to have leaders from the student chapter, is instead of looking at creating your own project, reach out to the various projects. I don't want to eliminate the labs from the flagship projects, but if you go down the list of the incubator projects, I mean, the projects that probably most need people are those incubator projects because they're just starting. They probably don't have very many contributors. If you look through those, find something that interests your students and just offer to help contribute, because I don't know a single project leader who wouldn't jump on, oh yeah, please, you know, I want more contributors. It allows the students to have a portfolio where they can show that they've actually contributed to this open source security project. Yep. Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much.